Hello, welcome to the end of week 3 on the course. Thanks for staying with us, and thanks for all of the kind of quality responses we've had this week. Some people are very thoughtfully engaged with the programme and given us some really great things to think about, some great areas of discussion, and I'm going to just dive into a few kind of highlights of that from the week. So, a big thing this week was all about luck, and a lot of people struggle separating luck from hard work and the relationship between the two. And the degree to which you subscribe to the idea of luck completely, in part, and in relationship to hard work was a big factor in a lot of the discussions that took place. So Hilary kicked us off with a great reference to the quote by Louis Pasteur that chance favours the prepared mind. So, luck favours those who are prepared. So what do we mean here by prepared? Well, that might be knowledge, that might be connections and networks, that might be the resources that they can call upon. But it basically means that those who are kind of in a position to be able to act tend to do better out of those sort of serendipitous, those lucky occurrences, because they can do something about them. Now, knowledge, connections and resources to me suggests another word, which is about privilege. Do you have the financial capital to act? Do you have the social capital to act? Do you have the confidence to act? And I think it's very difficult for a lot of people to kind of recognise sometimes that they have more privileges than they assume they do compared to other audiences. And it's not that it's all luck or that it is all hard work and that you can't be privileged and still work hard. Absolutely not. But it's about recognising what it is that you are starting from. So we've talked about Sarasvati's work before, and this idea of expert entrepreneurs making the most of what they have. And I think those who have more resource, more connections, often find it easier to get things done. There's a great analogy here with the idea of, are you successful because of the cards you were dealt in the game or the way that you play those cards? Because some people are clearly dealt better cards than others at the start of the game, but it's about how you use them. Sometimes people with great cards fail to use them. Sometimes people with terrible cards manage to still find a way to win the game. So it's really about what you choose to do with it. So luck is part of it, hard work is another part of it. They're not mutually exclusive. So just to turn to some of the advice that Richard Wiseman gave in section 3.7, where he was talking about luck, one of the principles there is, what are you able to make of the situation? Stuff will happen to you. Good stuff will happen, bad stuff will happen. What can you do with that situation to make the best of it? And actually your ability to be agile and respond positively goes a long way towards making your own luck. Because clearly some of the people that we were talking about this week did make their own luck. I mean, there was a fantastic list of accidental innovations, from cereal and popsicles to anaesthetic and Viagra. Like a great list of stuff, really, really interesting. And in almost every case, it wasn't pure luck. These were people who were able to make the most of the things that they spotted. Yeah, they spotted something that not everybody had, but part of that was because they were working in a lab. Part of that was because they knew what to make of the things that they saw, that they knew people who could capitalise on the observations and insights they'd gained. So there's a great mix in there of both luck and hard work that can be seen in those examples. So some of this is clearly about finding the right environments and the right ecosystems to make it more likely you can find those resources, make it more likely you can happen upon those insights that allow you to see something that maybe other people don't see, that maybe other people don't recognise, or that maybe other people are not in a position to act on where you are. So there's obviously a whole section in the week about finding the right environment, and thank you, Selena, for summing this up really well, because you talked about both having more and better ideas when you are comfortable, so actually with the kinds of friends where you felt like you could say things and you could observe things and you could be silly, but also recognising that you needed to find a more diverse set of networks and connections, that actually, whilst it's sometimes comfortable being with the same people all the time, that actually you don't necessarily get presented with new stuff, you don't get presented with challenges, you don't get presented with diversity. You're not going to happen upon accidental content that gives you opportunities. So finding that mix is really important. There's something in entrepreneurship about being comfortable being uncomfortable. Are you able to still operate, even if it's for a short while, in situations that you don't already understand, in which you are slightly uncomfortable, in which you maybe don't know the answers? I think that's something that's true of an awful lot of innovators, is that they were able to make the most of an uncomfortable situation. So developing those skills of kind of self-confidence, of being able to react and be agile, those make a difference. And they come back in many ways to those ideas of, being knowledgeable, being connected, having resources, having some domain expertise, makes it more likely that you can improvise in an uncomfortable situation. So that gets us to forms of innovation, because not all innovation looks the same. And I think it's really important that people don't get hung up on it. Always has to be kind of brand new products, brand new services. We had some great debate this week about, well, actually, is it one form of innovation or is it another? And inevitably, it's almost always a mix. That a new product is often based on a new process, is often based on new marketing and positioning insights, is often based on a new business model. So these things, again, are not mutually exclusive, but they just give you that sense that it isn't all just about brand new things. And particular thanks to Will in that section for bringing up a great link to humanitarian innovation, forms and formats. Really interesting reading. It's also worth pointing out that, again, radical steps and incremental steps in innovation often go hand in hand. So you could probably argue that the smartphone, for example, has got both radical and incremental features. Touchscreens, probably a radical step in terms of smartphones. So the iPhone was almost certainly radical compared to something like the BlackBerry, which is effectively just a tiny keyboard and a tiny screen. It's a computer in your hand. Touchscreens made a huge difference. I mean, they led to the whole rise of apps and the idea of operating something with just one or two fingers. There's some really radical steps in there. But actually, a lot of what's followed is just incremental improvements. The screen's a little bit better, the apps are a little bit better, the memory's enhanced, the camera's enhanced, the performance is enhanced. But it's based off a radical step. And innovation tends to move like that. You see big steps and then lots of little steps for a while, and then there'll be some radical step again, and then lots of incremental steps. Those of you who got involved in some of the brainstorming discussions, some great examples of Scamper. It's really interesting wrestling with some of those ideas, but some of you totally embraced that. And I think it's a willingness to be silly. Actually, you do have to write some daft stuff down to get to those. But that does put you into territory. You're more likely to come up with something that hasn't been thought of before. So silliness is a stepping stone to success. Thank you to George for bringing up the Gartner hype cycle. Yeah, that wasn't something that we initially put into the programme, but it's well worth looking at. I've included a link in that section about looking at the future. And one of the things about the Gartner hype cycle is it really gets you thinking about the timing of innovation, because just because it's innovative doesn't mean it's the right time for it. And that's because innovation and capability, the capability of doing something new, has always got to meet a need in the market. And lots of inventions were before their time. So timing kind of takes us back to this idea of, is this luck or preparedness? It might be hard work that gets you to invent something, but your luck might be all out in terms of whether the market is ready and waiting for you. So again, just think about that balance between kind of hard work and luck and adaptation, because if the market's not ready for your brand new idea, what do you do next? I think that's a really big question. So the big takeaway for me this week is the fact that hard work and luck are not mutually exclusive, but you need a bit of both. So how do you cultivate both? Well, next week we're going to try and pull all of this together in the final week, and we're going to talk about how you act on some of this stuff, and hopefully share some tools and techniques to help help you be that little bit more lucky. Good luck.